Hello, Peter.
Hi there.
Thank you very much for joining us here in this conference, Subject Creativity. And the topic today you were talking with the audience was the war in journalism. Who is in war with whom?
That's a very good question. I think the problem is that journalists have found themselves in the middle of a struggle, middle of a battle over ideas. The war on terror is essentially a war over ideas. A friend of mine once joked that the war on terror is a war on an abstract noun. It means whatever anyone wants it to mean. And so in that battle for ideas between Western liberal ideas of democracy and freedom and so on, and Islamic conservative ideas, the space where ideas are transmitted becomes a part of the battlefield. And so journalists are stuck in the middle. Both sides are attacking journalists. We've seen record numbers of journalists who've been killed. The Taliban, after 9/11, immediately started kidnapping and murdering journalists, specifically because they were journalists, not because they were bystanders in the conflict. And governments have also taken to locking up journalists and in some cases being involved in the murders of journalists. So I think we've been stuck in the middle from both sides, attacks from both sides.
You were also talking on free press and importance of the free press. What does it mean, free press, actually, and why do we need a free press in general?
Look, free press effectively means a press that is able to operate without censorship, without pressure, without political pressure, but also free from commercial influence. What you want is journalists who are free to investigate, to interrogate all of the parties to any political or social issues that are around at any given moment. Our job is to hold governments in particular, those in power, to account. We're not supposed to be easy, we're supposed to be difficult, it's supposed to be uncomfortable. That's how the system works. Now, a free press is important because, and particularly when it comes to governments, because people forget that this is the way in which we keep track of what politicians are doing in our names. Remember, we hire our politicians. Every time we vote, we hire them, and we pay their salaries through our taxes. They work for us. And so as their employers, we need to know what they are doing in our names. Often we lose sight of this very basic, very simple fact. The way that we keep track of what they're doing is through the press. Good journalism keeps those in government to account. Now, I'm not saying that we have to allow journalists to have free access to all corners of the government. Clearly there are some elements of it that we have to protect for the sake of national security and privacy issues. But there is a tendency these days to move towards less transparency, less accountability, and I think that's a very serious problem.
In these circumstances, what do you think, what are the challenges journalists are facing?
There are two big challenges at the moment. The first is the one that I was speaking about on stage today, and that's the pressure on journalists when it comes to national security. Governments are redefining national security in ever more broad ways that I think make it very difficult for journalists to work, because we're starting to be accused of violating national security, and that's what happened to us in Egypt. We were convicted on terrorism charges when in fact all we were doing was basic good quality journalism. And so that's one side of things. I think also, though, we're facing some very difficult technological challenges. Before the digital revolution, politicians and groups all over the place needed journalists to speak to the public. They needed to go through us. That gave journalists a lot of power, of course, but it also meant that we were able to fulfill our responsibility to make sure that we were able to analyse and question and challenge that information. Now, journalists are no longer absolutely necessary to the process, and in fact politicians and actors often see us as obstacles to their communication. They see us as getting in the way, they see us as sometimes making a mess of their communication. And I understand that. But that doesn't mean that we should be sidelined, and it doesn't mean that we should be stopped from doing our jobs.
You were sharing also your story on stage about imprisonment in Egypt. What did help you to survive this period of time?
That's a very good question. It's a very big question. we knew a little bit about the support that was coming from outside, and that was hugely important to us psychologically, knowing that we weren't fighting this on our own, that we weren't we hadn't been forgotten, that we still had friends and supporters all over the world who were behind us. But also the thing with prison that you learn very quickly is that as long as you are physically not being abused, as long as we weren't being tortured, we actually had all of the basic things that we needed for survival. We had food. It wasn't always great food, but we had it. We had water and we had shelter. The basic necessities for survival, physical survival. And in that environment, the only thing that's going to kill you, the only thing that's going to get you in the end is your own head. In fact, when you think about it, the whole point of prison is to mess with your head. So you need to make sure that you protect your psychological strength above all else. And that means staying physically fit, it means staying mentally active, it means staying spiritually active as well. So I spent a lot of time in meditation trying to make sure that I kept my head grounded and strong and solid.
You have also Latvian roots.
Yes, I'm very proud of those Latvian roots.
What does Latvia means to you?
It means an awful lot. You know, the Latvians claimed me when I was in prison. Years ago, even before I'd first visited Latvia, after Latvian independence, I went to the embassy in London and registered my patriality because I wanted it. Ultimately, I thought I'd be able to get a Latvian passport, but I never took it any further. I just filled in a form that said my father was born in Latvia. And I moved on. I was traveling a lot and never stopped in a country with a Latvian embassy for long enough to finish the process. And so when I was in prison, someone smuggled in a story, a newspaper story, and I read the story and I was described as a Latvian Australian journalist, and they quoted from a Latvian government official, and I thought, my God, they've claimed me. What happened was that a Latvian foreign ministry official saw my name and recognized that maybe I was Latvian, and got someone to check the records, and because I'd filled in that form, there was a number on the form, and that number meant that as far as the Latvian government was concerned, I existed. And so they gave me a passport while I was in prison. I was very proud of that. So I'm proud of the support that I got from Latvia. I'm very proud of my Latvian roots. I identify much more strongly with Latvia than I ever did before, because I didn't really understand how much Latvian culture, Latvian ideas, Latvian things had entered my own cultural DNA. When I came here for the first time, I felt far more at home, far more settled than I ever imagined. And so, yeah, it means a lot to me.
Soon Latvia will celebrate its 100th birthday. Is there anything you would like to wish to Latvian Latvians?
I wish for stronger economy. You know, I know that there are still issues in Latvia with poverty and underdevelopment. But I also wish for Latvia to remain independent for another 100 years. I think in the West, in Australia, certainly we take that as a given. We assume that too much. And I think places like Latvia that understand that this is not always a given means that that's something that we always need to fight to protect.
Peter, thank you very much.
It's a great pleasure.